What's going on YouTube? I'm Blaze and this is an advanced guide for Battlefront 2. These 5 points can be separated into 3 different core skills. Game sense, the knowledge and tactics unique to each encounter, map and class. Combat skills, your aim and strafing ability, and general tips, which can range from how to gain credits the fastest to how to spend your battle points. This guide is directed to those familiar with the game who need some improvement, but others can find this useful too. Starting with game sense, we have movement and positioning, pushing enemies. The focus of this tip is realizing when and when not to push the enemy, when to stay back and heal, and when to set up and defend. This tip mostly applies to the regular 4 classes, but it can be valid with special classes as well. Firstly, and perhaps obviously, do not push when you're weak. Even if your health bar is still white, you must get behind cover and heal. This is because when you push an enemy, even if they have less health than you, it is very easy for them to peek shot you and potentially eliminate you before you have the chance to react. When pushing enemies, you must have every other advantage possible. Along with this, you should not push an enemy if one of your key burst damage abilities is off cooldown, like the Assault's Vanguard or Heavy's Impact Grenade, unless the enemy has used up their cooldowns too. Lastly, do not push a group of healthy enemies if you are in their line of sight and don't have any help, because their firepower and numbers will be greater than yours. When encountering a large group of enemies, instead of facing them head on, try and flank around them and take them out one by one. Be careful, however, because if you shoot more than one enemy without taking them out, they'll be able to kill you easily as you're trapped behind enemy lines. Also make sure that when you're behind enemy lines, keep moving to reduce the chance of you being discovered. Finally, if you have a disadvantage and an enemy or a group of enemies is pushing you, most of the time the best thing to do is to get behind peekable cover from which you can quickly peek out and shoot, and burst the enemies down one by one. If your health bar reaches red, then either retreat if there's a safe path or stay in cover and heal. Secondly, movement and positioning, pushing objectives. Most of tip 1 applies here as well, except that we'll be taking a closer look at heroes and special classes. When taking or retaking objectives, the first thing to do is to make sure that you and your team are ready. Your team is ready if your firepower is at least as strong as the enemy's team. So, same strength/number of heroes, same firepower in regular infantry, and advantageous defensive placements, such as turrets or ATSTs, are destroyed. Then, the only 2 ways your team can successfully cap is if either sheer initial force, or if some of your team can successfully tilt the battle by flanking around or slowing down reinforcements. Warning, it will be almost impossible to take out an objective if your team isn't there to support. Unless it's the end of the match, the best thing you can do is sit back and try to pick off the defenders faster than they can respawn. This applies even if you are a hero. Lastly, it's important to mention that if you are being overrun by enemies on or outside an objective, you should retreat so that you can counterattack with your teammates. A quick but important side note is that when your team is taking an objective whilst attacking, provided most of them are still alive, you must push on to the next objective so that you don't lose momentum. Last tip for game sense, timing. This tip's focus is undoubtedly using and choosing your abilities and reinforcements correctly. The amount of times I see people chuck an iron grenade at a weak enemy just to be obliterated by a tank a moment later, use Ray for frontal assault opposed to flanking, or heavies choose barrage instead of the ion torpedo on Kashyyyk. Unfortunately, you can only master timing by improving your game sense through playing or watching good players. What I can tell you is a strategy to best apply your knowledge in most situations. Namely, it is to realize what each ability, class and reinforcement do best, and try and use them mostly where their main purpose is needed. For example, I have learnt that the smart iron grenade takes out turrets best, so I try and save my iron grenade for when I need to take out a turret. Or that Yoda is best for pushing objectives with his extra health ability, so I only use him for when my team needs to clutch an objective. Occasionally, you either don't have the equipment that is best suited to the situation, or the equipment you're using isn't ideal, in which case you choose the next best option, or use it for what it does second best. The fourth and only combat skill tip is on winning gunfights. This can be separated into 2 key points: having good aim, hitting more headshots than your opponent, and making yourself harder to hit. Having good aim is simple. Make sure you have a good sensitivity and practice with lower fire rate weapons like the Officer's S5 whilst trying to hit headshots. You can also practice whilst earning high amounts of credits by playing Arcade, the campaign if you haven't finished it, and Blast. Making yourself hard to hit is also easy, but keeping your aim steady whilst doing so takes practice. There are 4 key ways of making yourself harder to hit. To use each one properly, you must develop a good game sense of where to use each one. Firstly, strafing in the open. This should be used at all ranges whenever you aren't using any of the following tactics. Secondly, strafing around corners. This is best used where you can corner peek in third person and where you are using a low fire rate weapon so that you can move behind cover in between your shots, minimizing the time the enemy can shoot you whilst keeping your DPS the same. Simply get behind a corner and move in and out of cover whilst shooting. Next, jumping whilst shooting. Self-explanatory, this one should be used at close range. Jumping makes you hard to hit and easier for you to hit headshots. Lastly, rolling. You should be rolling when moving between cover, when you need to close distance to an enemy, when moving around a corner that could have an enemy, avoiding explosives, whenever you aren't shooting, i.e. when your blast overheats, and generally when engaging and disengaging. For the 5th and final tip, play Blast. As simple as that. Blast not only allows the least amount of time sitting in menus, so most amount of time getting kills, but Blast is also one of, if not the best game mode for grinding, offering the most amount of credits for each minute you play. Not to mention that it offers the most amount of XP too, because each kill is technically an objective. Unless you're completing challenges, playing your 15 arcade games, or the campaign, Blast is the best option. Hope you enjoyed. If this video gets enough support, I'll be coming out with more in-depth and advanced guides soon. Do subscribe. Remember, it doesn't cost you anything.